Well, this morning we are experiencing a different type of worship service, bringing together the sacred and the secular. Finding in an unexpected place a Disney movie that grossed over $600 million, some fundamental themes of Christian faith. Well, we Americans watch a lot of movies, but movies do more than tell a good story. They are expressions of raw emotion, vulnerability, and the human condition. They often function, surprisingly, like prayers, communicating our deepest longings and joys to a God that hears everyone. Our youth spent the fall looking at the sacred in the secular in popular music. They looked at top 40 radio and surprisingly found a lot of power there. Songs like Drake's God's Plan and Keisha's Praying, and learned a little bit about the faith of Lady Gaga and how many musicians we would be surprised to know are faithful and infuse that subtly in their music. But we shouldn't really be surprised to find religious themes in secular movies and music if we remember God's omnipresence. Now, omnipresence, that's a word we don't use every day. My husband always tells me, don't use that theological jargon, Liz. But I think it's important today. Because all that means is that God is all present. God is capable of being everywhere at the same time. God's Holy Spirit encompasses and infuses the whole universe. There is no location that God does not inhabit. And that means that we can find God's Holy Spirit, whether we are sitting in a pew in church or we are sitting in a movie theater seat. And that we can also talk to God anywhere. We can pray to God anywhere. And perhaps going to the movies is something we need to do to infuse us with some fresh perspectives on God. Well, for our meditation this morning, we are going to look at some of the themes in Moana, and we're going to look specifically at the way the ocean calls and sends her. And not only does it call and send her, it actually strengthens her to complete the mission. We're actually going to compare that with the call of the Apostle Paul to go out through the Roman Empire and tell about Jesus and how Christ's presence strengthens him to complete his journey. So we're going to begin with words from the letter Paul wrote to the churches he established in Philippi. Now, in this passage, he has been spreading the news of Jesus to the people of the city of Philippi. And it's found today in northeastern Greece. In ancient times, it was known as Macedonia. It was part of the Roman Empire, and the people there worshiped not only the emperor, but they also worshiped a variety of pagan gods, including actually the Egyptian gods and Isis. Well, Paul was thrown into jail for teaching people about Jesus, and he writes a letter to the members of the new churches that he has formed to encourage them to keep their faith despite his persecutions and despite the risk of persecution that they face. So let's listen now to these words from the letter to Philippians chapter 4. I'm going to begin with verse 8 and end with verse 13. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace be with you. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Christ, who gives me strength. Friends, this is the word of the Lord for this morning. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Startle us, O God, with your truth. Quiet all voices in us, O Lord, and help your Spirit come in. Help us to hear your voice calling to us, speaking to us, encouraging and awakening us this morning to your love, your presence, and your power. Amen. Well, some of you may remember a Sports Illustrated cover from about 9 years ago, when then Florida Gators quarterback Tim Tebow was on the cover. The headline read, "Tim Tebow, man of many missions," referring to the way he created a fan frenzy with his unique blend of faith and football. Well, in the cover photo, he is there, he's looking determined, his lips are pursed, and that determination and strength is just kind of oozing from him. And then scribbled in the eye black underneath his eyes are tiny words, PHIL.413, Philippians 4:13. And that's the passage that we ended with, the last verse we read today. Well, Philippians 4:13 is one of the most popular verses in the Bible, having been printed on millions of keychains and t-shirts, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs. It is one of my favorite verses, and I repeat it to myself often. And I often send it to people in emails when they are going through trials in their life. And some of you may have gotten emails from me with Philippians 4:13 quoted. But this verse is also one of the most misunderstood, misused, and often misinterpreted verses. Because some people think that if they are just determined enough, or have faith enough, or pray enough, that Christ will ensure that they receive whatever they strive for. As one scholar explains, this verse is not really about who has the strength to play to the best of their abilities. This verse is about having the strength to be content when we are facing those moments in life when our physical resources are gone. Paul isn't telling us that we should dream bigger dreams and that Christ will make them come true. That anything is possible if we just have enough faith. Instead, Paul is reminding us that we can endure the crushing feeling of defeat if our dreams don't come true. Paul's not encouraging us to go out and conquer the world. He's reminding us that we can press on when it seems like the world is conquering us. He is telling us that God can empower us to do what we could never do on our own, to endure and sustain what we could never endure or sustain on our own, that God will provide the strength. Well, that is exactly what Moana experiences in the movie. She has heard the legend that the world is crumbling because the heart of Te Fiti has been stolen and that the world will be destroyed if it is not returned. At first she is told this is just a myth. As long as you stay on the island, you will be safe. But then the fish start disappearing. Try the other side of the island. Well, they do that. No fish. Try the other side. No fish. Suddenly the people find that fish are disappearing and they don't know where they're going. They open up the coconuts and the coconuts start rotting. Well, Moana realizes that this is not a myth. This is real. It's happening. And her people are in danger. So the ocean, which is a symbol for God in the movie, calls to her and sends her out to leave the safety of the island and begin a quest to find and return the heart of Te Fiti. Moana is a young girl. She doesn't really know how to sail, or navigate the stars. She isn't fit for this task. But she does know that for some strange reason, the ocean is calling her to it. The ocean wants to send her out. And so she goes. From a Christian standpoint, Moana represents Jesus' followers, and the sea represents God. The ocean calls to Moana just as God calls to us to do God's work in this world. And we must choose whether we're going to answer that call, whether we're going to follow or not. Well, once Moana realizes the ocean is meant to help her find her way, she becomes accustomed to its assistance. However, there are moments when the waters don't seem to aid her when she calls to them, but they rather find a way and a helping hand at a later point. When we call to God, God doesn't always immediately answer us, but God is always there and often shows his work at an unexpected time. Moana's doubts and struggles with her ties to the ocean also reflect our struggles to believe in God. After several draining battles and hurtful fights, Moana begins to lose hope in everything she once believed. She thinks the ocean abandoned her, and in her darkest moments, she tells the ocean it chose the wrong person. She can't do this. The ocean, representing God, accepts her rejection, but it is able to convince her of her calling. We too often experience doubt in God, especially in times of hardship and worry. We must remember that in the darkest moments, God will reveal himself in unexpected ways. And that is where the words of Philippians 4:13 come in. I can do all this through Christ who strengthens me. Part of the beauty of Moana is that unlike other Disney movies, like Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast, where the story is about a princess who has some hardship, an evil stepmother who is, captured by the beast, and then things change and the princess ends up living happily ever after. Moana is quite a different story. It's a story about the world in trouble and an unlikely young girl who is called and sent on a mission to save it. Moana actually puts her life on the line and derives her strength to complete this mission from the ocean. Just like the Apostle Paul gets his strength to complete his mission for Christ. Now, we're probably not going to be called to put our lives on the line as Paul and Moana were. But God calls to each one of us and has a role for us in sustaining this amazing world. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Paul penned these words sitting in a dark, dank, first-century prison cell, not knowing if he would make it out alive or not. This really happened. This wasn't a movie. Paul answered God's call to preach the good news of Jesus Christ to the people of the Roman Empire, to leave the safety of his hometown, to be sent out. And Paul knew that God's sustaining presence was there with him. Paul wrote these words to encourage the new believers that he had met, to strengthen them in their faith. And he also wrote these words for us, for you and I over 2,000 years later, so that we would know that Christ's sustaining presence is here with us, too, if we call out to God. I can do all this through Christ who gives me strength. These are powerful words, but we need to understand them You see, the Bible does not teach that God will give you the strength to do whatever you set your mind to or whatever you want, because that puts our desires first rather than God's mission for the world. Thinking like that can get people off track, wondering why they didn't get the job they wanted, or their recent promotion, or why they had not been cured. In these situations, many wonder if God has abandoned them. But God is not Santa Claus dispensing good gifts to us if we are good enough. It's not like that. Instead, the Bible teaches that God is our sustainer when life feels unsustainable. That God is with us in the trenches. And not only is he with us in the trenches, because of the suffering of Christ, he actually has experienced it. He understands our human condition. Well, this is great news because I don't know about you, but my experience is that life is often messy and unpredictable and full of disappointments. But we worship a God who gives us strength to work through and overcome whatever we face. But we can't do it alone. We need God to give us strength. In the movie Moana, Te Fiti had turned into a destructive monster without her heart. And isn't that a powerful metaphor for what happens to us if we lose our heart, if we lose our capacity to love? We too turn destructive. But when Moana risks her life returning Te Fiti's heart, Te Fiti sheds her monster skin. Suddenly the monster that you didn't realize was her, oh my gosh, that was Te Fiti. That is what she had turned into without her heart. And when the heart is back in place, that skin sheds and she turns into this green, glowing, beautiful, flowering goddess. This mission that Moana was called to was too big for her to complete alone. She knew that. She experienced doubt. Other people told her she couldn't do it, and she tried to give up at times. But what kept her pressing on was the fact that she knew she wasn't alone. Moana was able to complete her mission because of the encouragement and strength she received from the ocean. The ocean god was with her, giving her the strength she needed. Well, the Apostle Paul drew his strength from Christ. He was able to complete his mission because of the strength that Christ gave him. And he wrote the words we read today to encourage us, to awaken our faith, to awaken a deep sense of the love that God has for us and that is within us. To remind us that God calls each of us to join him on his mission in this world. And that although God may not give us what we want, he will provide what we actually need. Strength. Strength to survive the challenges we face, and an invitation to awaken to his life-sustaining presence and his unconditional love. I can do all this through Christ, who strengthens me.